Hey everyone, welcome to the NoochieCast, episode 12. And we are pushing the end of May, which means we've ended the spring game season, which, in hindsight, usually the last spring of consoles, like the last spring of the console life cycle before the new generation of consoles comes out, is usually, it's a lot more jam-packed than this year's was. And, the quarantine has something to do with that for sure. A little bit, I guess. But I think we were expecting this to be a lot more of a jam-packed year than it really has turned out to be. Part of it comes with the natural delays that we saw. So like something like Cyberpunk, where it was initially for like April, and it's pushed back to September now. Marvel's Avengers, pushed back to August or September. I don't remember. The Last of Us, obviously coming out in a couple weeks. I'll be talking about that in a bit. And Ghost of Tsushima. All four of those are still to come out, which are all four of them are really big. But usually, like, you think back to 2013 at the end of the PS3 and Xbox 360 life cycle, and there was big game week after week. Even don't even think about like The Last of Us coming out in June and GTA coming out in September, but like before that, when you're thinking like Tomb Raider and BioShock and other games that I'm not remembering offhand, but it felt like 2013 was such a big year for games, and this year just felt different. We had Doom and Animal Crossing coming out on the same day, and Final Fantasy VII obviously coming out, and other games, Resident Evil 3, and then obviously the games that are still coming up. But it just feels like it's been a bit more lackluster than other end of console generation springs, which isn't necessarily good or bad. Maybe it's just a sign of how more games are getting spread out throughout the year, and we still have at least 4 major current gen games coming out for the rest of the year before hopefully the new gen consoles come out. But I don't know, who's to say? It just it feels a little different than I was expecting. But on one of those new games that's still yet to come out, let's start with the news. And the first of two one big news and one also big news for people who aren't me. The first one is the big news for people who aren't me, is that The Last of Us Part 2 had a big state of play, like a kind of an all showing thing where it was like 25 minutes of new details, new gameplay, things like that. Just update, I'm still on media blackout for it. I have seen very little. I saw the screenshot of Ellie killing someone playing a Vita, which is a little cruel. They were already playing a Vita, but I haven't seen anything else from it. So I'm still really excited for it to come out. I'm still I've still yet to see any major spoilers. See things here and there that are a little kind of give a little details that you don't expect, but I haven't seen any story spoilers. I haven't really seen any gameplay spoilers of anything new as far as I know, and I really don't know what I'm getting into. So I'm really happy that I'm going in blind, and that's just about 3 weeks away, which is really exciting. The second and final piece of news, but this is a big one, is that just today, as I'm recording this, PlayStation fucking finally announces that they're doing a PS5 reveal next Thursday, June 4th. So it's coming up, so it's less than a week away. It's coming up the week before E3 would have been, which feels like it might have been what they were anticipating anyway, at least this time frame where they were, trying to think like, hey, how can we get it out before E3 so we kind of take some of the steam away from Xbox if they were to announce it at E3 or during their E3 conference. It does just seem like it's so late at this point think back to 2013, along with all those games that were coming out, there were the PS4 conference was in late February, and the Xbox One conference, which at the time we thought was so late, we were like, why is this happening as late as it's happening? Had already happened at this point. It was in mid to late May. So I don't know why the companies have waited for so long. I've already talked about how I thought the Xbox One so before the game reveal that they had a few weeks ago, I've thought their messaging up to this point has been really good. And the way they've been kind of seeping out information consistently, but not enough information at like regular intervals, which has been really good compared to PlayStation, which has just been like, here's the controller and here's the specs and here's the logo. It's, it's weird. But finally, it looks like PS5 is going to be beating Xbox to the punch, where they're going to hopefully reveal a bunch of the details. And I do want to go through and talk about some of my predictions for it. I'm not going through like 1 through 5. Here are my predictions. But I do just want to go through and say, like, here's what I'm expecting to happen. Here's what I'm not expecting to happen. Just so we can, see what's up. So my number one, just to go through the expectations, I have a list here. First is obviously I would be absolutely shocked if they don't reveal the physical box of the console. They've already revealed the controller. The video, the little like teaser video that they showed today was showing the controller in a different light. It did look like an all black controller, which if that were to happen, it would kind of assuage some of my fears about it, because I just thought it looked really weird with the white and black. Although I did see someone say that it might have just been the lighting that made it look like that. Who knows? But I would be absolutely flabbergasted if they don't reveal the console. At the PS4 reveal event, they didn't reveal the console, like the physical console. Maybe because it wasn't finalized yet. But at this point, if they don't have it finalized, I would be just absolutely... It would be unbelievable. The other one is the UI reveal. Just, here's what the operating system looks like. When you boot up your PS5, here's what you can expect to see. Obviously, there can be changes from here to when they are going to release it. So, like, what it actually is going to look like when you have it in your hands might be a little different. But I am expecting at least some kind of UI reveal. And third, before they get to any games, I would expect some kind of showcase as to how it works. Like what makes the PS5 special compared to the PS4 specifically, and the PS4 Pro. Like, why is this console so much better? What I had in mind is the Spider-Man loading sequence that they showed in... I don't even know. Was that 2018, 2019? The video that they showed of how much faster Spider-Man could load on a PS5 versus on a PS4 or even a PS4 Pro. I'm expecting some like long kind of drawn out, like drilling it into your head of how good this console is at like rendering things and what the SSD does, going over the specs again in a much more concise and easily digestible way. I think that would be something that they should do for sure, because if people are already a little unsure about what the PS4 Pro is, I think it's obviously gone down a little bit. People kind of understand it now, and PS5 compared to PS4 is a lot easier. But I do think people want to know why this is different from a PS4, and that would be one way to do it. Next, they're obviously going to show a bunch of games, and there will hopefully be a good number of game reveals. First game reveal, I think, is like the lock of locks. I cannot imagine that they don't reveal this there. Horizon 2 from Guerrilla. Horizon Zero Dawn launched in 2017. So we're at about 3 years, I think a little over 3 years at this point. I cannot fathom a world where Horizon 2 isn't revealed, because it's been so heavily rumored as the flagship launch title or launch window title, that it seems like a game that they really, especially like an open world like that has so much to render, it seems like something that they would really want to talk about. Maybe that's the game they use to showcase that loading time, or some kind of technical feature that the PS5 has. Maybe something like that. Another game I think they're definitely going to show is something from Insomniac. Now, the easy pick here is Spider-Man 2. The whatever it's called, the new Spider-Man game, but Spider-Man did come out in 2018, and so we're not even at 2 years yet from when that game came out. And we're barely at a year from when Insomniac joined Sony, like from when Sony bought Insomniac. So I feel like they might be a little like not there yet on Spider-Man 2, which means that the other game that I've heard rumored is Ratchet, like another Ratchet game that's coming from Insomniac, maybe from a smaller team within. I've heard that they're developing both, that Ratchet 2 or whatever, Ratchet, the new one, is going to come out as a launch title, and Spider-Man 2 might come out like next fall, which I could buy, give him 3 years to develop Spider-Man 2. I think that would be really a foreseeable timeline, especially since Ratchet didn't, that one released in like 2016, right? I could definitely see that happening, where I don't think they're going to talk about both. I don't think Ted Price comes out and is like, hey, here's Ratchet, the new one, and Spider-Man 2. I think they're going to come out and say, like, either here's Spider-Man 2 and it's a launch title, or here's Ratchet, the new one, and it's a launch title. I don't think they say here's Ratchet 2 or whatever, and here's Spider-Man 2, and it's not coming out for another 2 years or another year and a half. But I do think Insomniac will be there in some capacity, especially because they're such a big studio and they're such a new one. Not new, but like new to the PlayStation catalog, as in they were just bought. I think it would be a really good play for them to be there, especially because they probably have something in the pipeline for launch. Another one, I think, like last time, just this seems like something that's perpetually there, is just some new Japan studio, new IP, or old IP, I don't know. Something from Japan studio that shows creativity, that, shows like this is art style, like some weird art style, something that's just like, we don't just have these big blockbusters like Horizon and Spider-Man or Ratchet or whatever. We also have these kind of artsy games that, like the people in the know understand what Studio Japan is, but the people who aren't might be like, oh, that's kind of a cool, more indie game. And that would be, fine. Something like Knack was there last time. I've seen a bunch of people saying Knack 3 is going to be there now. I don't think so, but, who's to say? Gran Turismo is, I would say, probably going to be there. GT Sport came out in like 2014, I think, and there hasn't been one since. I think like GT is like under the radar, one of the, or if not the most selling PlayStation exclusive of any PlayStation exclusive series, or at least they were a few years ago. And it would make sense that Gran Turismo is still on PS5, and there's a new one coming out, and that's something they want to highlight here, because even if there's a big group of people who don't really care about Gran Turismo, there's a huge group of people who do. So that's something that I'm not entirely convinced it'll be there, but I'm sure there will be a Gran Turismo game on PS5 relatively soon after launch. But I could definitely see it there in some capacity at the reveal event. Another game that's been heavily rumored for years now, but has never been showcased, is whatever Blue Point is remaking. I believe I might sound dumb here, but I'm pretty sure the last game they remade was Shadow of the Colossus. I'm pretty sure that was a Blue Point game. and the rumor has been that they're remaking Demon Souls, which would be really interesting to see how that holds up from like 2007 or 2009, I think, coming to 2020. But that game has been so heavily rumored for so long that it just seems like it's either going to show up now and it's a launch title, or it's just stuck in development hell for some reason. Like, not even switching developers, just like it's not working, or I don't know. It just feels like it's been in development for so long that it's got to come out at some point, and this just feels like the perfect time to do it. Because there's, like, thinking about the future, I'll get back to this in a sec, but thinking about the future, like, when are they going to reveal any new games? Like, they have to reveal their launch titles here, and there needs to be at least one or two flagship launch titles, as always. Obviously, there are going to be the third parties that I'll get to in a sec, but, like, there has to be probably Horizon, but not for certain that Horizon's a launch title. It might pull an Infamous and be a like a launch window game, come out in spring of next year. And there aren't going to be any other times later this year to announce anything that really make much sense. Because, like, I think they're not going to go in June, announce this, and then, like, in late June or July at any point, are they going to have another state of play where they're just like, and here's a whole new bunch of titles? I just don't see that happening. So they would have to wait until like August or September, and that seems so close to launch, assuming they launch in like late October, early November, to really announce anything. Give it like a month or two, or like 2 or 3 months of hype before launch. That's just not, it just doesn't really make sense. So I think all these games really have to be announced here, or else they're just going to be announced on an individual basis, which is great for that title. But I like to be associated with the PS5, especially for a launch title or like a PS5 flagship title. I really think they have to be announced here, or they have to wait a year or two to be like released, actually. Like, assuming they're revealed at the Game Awards this year or E3 next year. I don't know. Who knows? A couple things I don't expect to be announced here. God of War 2. God of War came out about 2 years ago now, and a little over 2 years. And that game seemed like it took so long to develop. And I understand that it was essentially a complete reboot of the series, that like they revamped everything from, graphics, gameplay, the storytelling, just everything, like the world, everything. So this would be a little bit less of an undertaking for the team, but I just don't see them coming out and saying, here's God of War 2, because I can't see them saying, we're going to have made it in 2.5 years after God of War 1 came out, or the God of War 2018 came out. I don't see that being 2.5 years. I see it taking 3 or more. And I could definitely see that being like an early, like, if Spider-Man 2 is a 2021 game, like a spring 2021 game or fall 2021 game, I could absolutely see God of War being a spring 2022 game, and that being the lineup for them. That gives them 4 years to develop it, which is a lot of time. And also, just looking at their portfolio, they've kind of blown their load in terms of first-party games at the end of the past 2 to 3 years. And they're not going to show anything from Sucker Punch. Obviously, they're not going to show anything from Naughty Dog, anything new. And that means that the new God of War after Spider-Man is kind of got to hold up the first parties for a couple years. And I don't, unless they come out with something that we're not expecting, or something that I'm just completely forgetting at this point, I really don't think it would be a smart portfolio management move to say, like, here's God of War 2 and also Spider-Man 2 and also Horizon 2 that are all coming out like launch in 2020, early 2021, and then late 2021, and then go like 2 years without a big first party title, because that just doesn't, they're smarter than that. I don't think that's going to happen. Unless they have something up their sleeve that we don't know about. I just really don't think that's going to happen. And lastly, I don't think they're going to show anything of current gen games because, like I said, I think this is going to be about differentiating the PS5 from the PS4. They know they have their PS4 install base, and they're going to talk about like, yeah, it's backwards compatible and you can transfer all your friends and your PS Plus moves over and all that shit. But like, I don't think they're going to show like Destiny 2 coming over to PS5 and being like, here's how it runs on PS5. Cause I think that would just put people in the mindset of like, oh, this is just another PS4 Pro, which like maybe it is in terms of just another upgrade, granted a significant upgrade in power, but just another upgrade in power. I don't think they want to put that in people's minds. Whereas if they were to just show like, here's a new game from Guerrilla, here's a new game from Insomniac, here's a new Gran Turismo game, here's XXX. I hope they don't show XXX actually, because that would be a bold move, but I don't think it would be a great move. But like, here's all these different games that you've never seen before. They look incredible. They're only playable on PS5. That would be a really cool way to do it, and it would be probably the best way to do it. In terms of third parties, I was struggling to come up with games that I think they're going to show from third parties, which means maybe they have some reveals that we don't know about. Or the one that I thought of could happen is Watchdogs Legion, which I think has a pretty decent chance of being there. The original Watchdogs was at the PS4 reveal event. Watchdogs Legion, we really haven't heard from in a while. Ubisoft is doing their like Ubisoft Forward, I think it's called, in July, which is basically going to be their E3 press conference. And it would make sense to, have this thing in early June and then kind of build up hype for it and then show like another big chunk of it in July. I do think that would be a possibility to show in this press conference, but I'm honestly really struggling to come up with any other third parties. I don't think like Call of Duty is going to be there, because Call of Duty usually does their own reveals, and they are pretty external from exclusivity at this point. I know they do like their things with PlayStation because of their deals, but like it's not like Destiny, where they had these like really strong exclusive deals that PlayStation was just pounding every single time. I don't think they're going to do that. So I honestly, third parties, I'm really open for. I don't know what's going to be there. Maybe they don't show any. I don't believe that, but maybe they show like 2 or 3. Maybe they show something from Square. They show like Final Fantasy 16. I saw someone say like Final Fantasy 7 Part 2. I don't believe that. That's not going to be there. But that would be something that's kind of a wild card here, and I just honestly don't know what it's going to be. A little bit more, I definitely think they're going to talk about VR a bunch. Well, not a bunch necessarily, but like they're going to mention it because PSVR has definitely been something they're pushing and they want to implement more. I assume there will be a bundle where the PS5 will come with PSVR in some capacity. I'm sure, obviously, with that PSVR will be compatible with PS5 and they don't need like a PSVR 2. But I think they will show some kind of VR segment where they have like, here's a London studio game, or here's some third party games, or here's some more experiences that will just kind of show how VR works better on PS5, along with still innovating on VR in terms of gameplay and in terms of immersion, which are still kind of, roadblocks that they have to come across. I am a little back and forth on price and date. I'm considering the possibility that they announce the price. I don't think they're going to announce the date. I think the price will be $4.99 regardless. One of the other things that I had after this is they're doing, they've announced a couple other PS5 things, and one of them is that they have not changed the price of the PS5 because of COVID. So I do think it's still going to be $4.99, and I think they'll announce it. They'll announce it, but I'm not 100% sure. I think $4.99. Honestly, now that I'm talking about it, the less I think they're going to announce it, because $4.99 comes off to people still as high, like a little bit above their price range. Maybe it was because the Xbox One had already announced $4.99 and $3.99 just seems so low relatively for the PS4. But I think people still see $4.99 as like kind of a high price point, and they want it to be $3.99. So if PS5 comes out and says $4.99, that might just put a bitter taste in people's mouths. But who knows? I'm like I said, I'm really back and forth on this. Now that I've talked it out, I think I think a little less that they're going to announce the price, and I'm fairly convinced they won't announce a date, especially now. But I don't know. I think that's another wild card. That would be interesting to see, especially if the price isn't $4.99. If it's somehow cheaper than that, I think they definitely will announce it, because if it's a positive, then they want that to be part of it. But if it's not necessarily, then they won't. Like I mentioned, there were a couple other pieces of news for the PS5. They're not changing the price because of COVID. And the other was that Jim Ryan talked about PS5 exclusives, as opposed to, how Xbox is doing it, where for at least a while, Xbox Series X games will be playable on Xbox One and Xbox One X. PS5 will not be doing that. As in, I'm sure there will be cross-gen games. I guarantee The Last of Us, Ghost of Tsushima, Cyberpunk, things like that. Like, all these big games now will be coming to PS5 in some way, relatively soon. I don't expect, like I said, The Last of Us or Ghost to be at the conference talking about their PS5 versions, but I'm sure they will be on the PS5 at some point pretty soon. But he's saying that there will be games on PS5 that are not on PS4. Horizon 2, I don't think will be a PS4 game, in addition to PS5. Spider-Man 2, not going to be a PS4 game. God of War 2, obviously. Maybe there will be some, but I understand, and I probably agree with the sentiment that PS5 needs to have games that aren't on the PS4, and not just PS5, the Xbox Series X. I would probably agree with that, though they do seem to be, PlayStation and Xbox, diverging in their strategies in how they are attacking the next gen strategy, because Xbox is really going the phone route. Like, you can see Xbox Series X will probably beget Xbox Series X2, X3, something like that, over the next few years, and PS5 is going to get, like, sure, it's PS5, maybe PS5 Pro, but PS5 is a little more traditional game console, and Xbox is taking the phone route. But that'll be really interesting to see what comes out of this conference on Thursday, and I'm really excited. We haven't had a conference like this in, like, unless you count the Game Awards, we haven't had a big conference since last E3. And obviously, this isn't a conference; it's a state of play or whatever they're going to call it. I honestly don't even know how they're going to do it. It's going to be really interesting, but I'm super excited. Like I've mentioned, I love these conferences. I love everything about them, and I'm super hype, absolutely super ultra mega hype for this conference. Talking about what I've been playing, there's really not a lot, because like I mentioned last week, Saints Row the Third Remastered came out. Saints Row the Third is my favorite game of all time. So the remastered version came out, and I put about 35 hours into it this week, and that's it. That's all I've been playing. So go see my Saints Row the Third recent retrospective if you want to know why I think it's great. None of my opinions have changed. Still my favorite game of all time. This probably just reinforced that. I will say, does get kind of annoying at the end. Also, one thing about it, people were saying that this is like one of the best remasters they've ever seen. It's good in terms of like they made the graphics better from 2011 to now. They they made it for the new console, but I guess I was playing on a launch Xbox One still, but this game crashed on me regularly. Like it crashed on me to the point where I had to build that into what I was doing, because I knew I started to understand when it was going to crash, and I couldn't do anything about it, but I just had to be prepared for it. Like there was a point where I understood that I couldn't play a certain mini game after I had been playing the game for more than like an hour or two, because it would just crash every single time. And I reproduced that 5 or 6 straight times. So I got that. And then it just started crashing on me regularly. Probably throughout 35 hours, it crashed on me 10 or 11 times. Which is frustrating. But other than that, it's still, like, that doesn't take away from the fact that this game is absolutely fucking amazing. And it holds up in spades. Still one of the best games I've ever played. My favorite game of all time. Yeah. Moving on. That's all I've been playing. My main story this week is surprisingly not the predictions for the PS5 conference. My main story this week is actually we are looking forward to the PS5 and Xbox Series X generation. I want to look back, as I've done a few times already, but I want to look back at the PS4 and Xbox One generation at some of the biggest controversies. And I kind of just want to go through them and see, like, what happened and where are we now? Just to, like, talk through them and understand what were the controversies just in substance, but what ultimately happened with them, and like how have they evolved, how have they changed the industry or games or people surrounding games. That I think is a really interesting way to look back at the industry. So the first one, these are in no particular order, and they are not all inclusive. So one omission that I'll admit from here is Gamergate, because Gamergate is such a complicated topic, and I won't say it's still really going on, because it's very much like it was kind of contained in like that 2014, 2015 kind of time period, but I also I just don't really have much to say about it. It's just super divisive, and like, I don't know, so much going on that made it incredibly confusing that I really just don't really want to talk about it any further than that. But like I mentioned, these are in no particular order, not all inclusive. If I forgot something, fuck me. I don't know. First, was actually the one that made me think of this topic is the kind of the exclusivity debate over the kinds of exclusivities that certain games and publisher deals give to certain consoles. The one that made me think of this is Rise of the Tomb Raider, but that I think was the culmination of a lot of preceding events that kind of were more and more exclusive in a way that made it climax at Rise of the Tomb Raider. And then since then, I feel like it's really just gone kind of out the door. So if you think back, like, there were, even back in the PS3 and 360 generation, there were a lot of exclusive games for sure. Think like Portal 2 coming to PS3, or Call of Duty was always the big one, where Call of Duty was just straight up associated with Xbox forever because they had this marketing deal where Xbox would get the map packs 30 days early. And there were others. Marketing deals have always existed, and I'm sure they always will continue to exist, just to associate games with platforms. But I don't really see that as exclusivity. It was more like we got into this generation still riding the coattails of Call of Duty is an Xbox franchise, and here are all these exclusive like little nuggets that you can get. Destiny showed up on the PS4 stage, and that was big because they would show like, oh, PS4 is getting all these exclusive like guns and maps and betas. The exclusive beta was such a big deal for a while. I was watching an old E3 conference, and The Division had an exclusive beta on Xbox One. Destiny obviously had one on. Actually, Destiny had an exclusive alpha on PS4, and was early on the beta that Xbox didn't get until a few days later. Like, it's all those little things that I think really started to kind of culminate and make and just grow over time into a little small thing, getting map packs early, into bigger and bigger things that were not even necessarily more substantive in their exclusivity, but they were definitely more publicized. The PS4 got like a couple extra missions for Watchdogs that like people wouldn't have even noticed, or they would have just been like, it's like 30 minutes to an hour of gameplay. But PS4 was like, we love Watchdogs, and Watchdogs is like, you're not getting the full experience if you're not playing on PS4. Look at these 2 missions. You're not getting those if you're playing anywhere else. That was the kind of controversy, or the kind of exclusivity that with publicizing that kind of became a problem. And then we come out and, that was the other thing, with console exclusives. This generation, like, you're thinking with all these indies, like, it was such an indie war where the, like, PS4 and Xbox would just go at each other with, we have all these console exclusives, like, we're PlayStation, and we scooped up No Man's Sky, and we have No Man's Sky as a console exclusive. We are Xbox, and we have like We Happy Few as an Xbox exclusive, console exclusive, or whatever other game. And they would just go at each other with, here's all these exclusive games that we have that you can't be like, you can still play on PC, but you can't play on PS4, you can't play on Xbox One. It just got tiring. And then we culminate with Rise of the Tomb Raider, a huge game. The sequel to one, I discussed it in being part of one of the biggest springs in gaming in 2013, Tomb Raider, and it gets this sequel, and they're like, this entire game, not just 2 missions, the entire game is exclusive to Xbox One for like a year, but they didn't even say it was a year. They would just be like as part of the same conference that the Division beta was in, Xbox has that, that little the little screen right before at their conferences. It's like world premiere exclusive. Before the Rise of the Tomb Raider thing, they say Xbox exclusive holiday 2015. So they were just as obscure with their messaging as possible to not let people understand if it was permanently an exclusive, which, side note, if they're not confident and straightforward about it being a permanent, always exclusive, it is not. Just, anyway, back. That whole thing just became like such a huge deal that people were so mad about. And honestly, kind of, I might say rightfully so. Like, Rise of the Tomb Raider, I don't know how much money they paid Square for it to be exclusive to the Xbox One, but for that big of a game that isn't primarily an exclusive to become an exclusive game for a while just seems like such a weird move. for them, if they're not just like either buying the IP or buying the studio or like the publisher, which they're obviously not going to buy Square, it was just such a weird move for the time. And it felt like a little bit of a desperate move, which granted, Xbox was desperate at the time, less so now, but it was so weird. And looking at it since then, there are still obviously a lot of partnerships where like, oh, Cyberpunk is associated with Xbox and they have this, like they're obviously on their stage all the time and they have this weird console, like an exclusive console for the Xbox One X, which is great. Like I think that's cool. That's not inhibiting anything. That exclusivity is saying, here's this cool thing that you can get if you want, but also if you're on PS4, you can also buy it. Basically, as long as if a game is exclusive to a console forever and always, I'm fine with it. Because that's just, hey, buy our console. Like, that's that. Otherwise, I don't think there's a reason to just withhold anything. Like, why withhold like 4 missions from a game? Because it's so insignificant, but at the same time, it's like just saying like, hey, fuck you, player on Xbox One, because you still bought our game, but we actually would prefer if you buy it on this other console. I don't like it. If it's exclusive permanently forever, great. Otherwise, it just kind of rubs me the wrong way. Anyway, that single one went longer than I was anticipating. The next one is kind of just one I thought of it off the top of my head, and there's a definitely recency bias here. Something about leaks. This generation has been filled with a lot of leaks. The recency bias has to come with The Last of Us, but I don't think that's necessarily the kind of leaks I'm always talking about. The Last of Us getting fully leaked basically sucks, but I don't think that's a symptom of a larger trend in gaming. I think that was just people being assholes. The other leaks I'm kind of talking about are the leaks that come before like E3, where and I'm not criticizing him for this, but Jason Schreier, I like Jason Schreier, the utmost respect for him. He's absolutely amazing at what he does. I follow him. I love his articles, everything. Just with that said, he does leak a lot of things, especially in the weeks and months leading up to E3, where most of the game reveals happen throughout the year. And this is more of just, honestly, it's more of a question. Is this okay? Is it acceptable to leak a reveal of a game for the audience and for the developers? Like, I personally enjoy a conference less when I know what's coming. Like, I know, so one example from last year is Elden Ring, the new From Software game that was that's being developed in tandem with George R.R. Martin. That was heavily leaked, basically revealed in the weeks leading up to the Xbox press conference. I enjoyed that reveal less than I would have if I didn't know about it. Does that mean I'm entitled to not know about anything going into these conferences, or is it a journalist's duty to reveal these things? If they find out about it, if Jason Schreier or someone from IGN or GameSpot or Kotaku finds out about some new game that we don't know about, it happens every year with Assassin's Creed. Are they obligated, or do they have the responsibility, or just the ability to reveal that to the public? I think it can go both ways. I think there are times when things are leaked just to be leaked. And like, obviously if you're leaking something, you're going to get clicks, and traffic is what drives revenue. especially now in the online era, if you leak a new game, that's going to get clicks and that's going to drive revenue, and that's perfectly understandable. But at the same time, I think when you're leaking if you're just saying like, oh, I don't even know. It sometimes it rubs me the wrong way when they are like, oh yeah, you know what's going to be announced tomorrow? This new From Software game. But if it's like Assassin's Creed and it's like 4 months out from E3, and they say, the new Assassin's Creed game is like heavily rumored to be this Vikings game, that I'm fine with, because that's not like, there's nothing imminent. It's not like you were just on the E3 floor and you saw, oh, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, that's got to be it. That was like that's just like a real, I found out about this. But it's really hard to tell of like when something is just being leaked because they just came across something, or when something's being leaked because it was actually something that they've been told and it's like a decent amount of time away. I don't know. It really goes both ways, and it might honestly be a double standard at this point. I don't really love leaks because I think the reveals are just so much fun, but I also don't love publishers having all of the say over when things are announced and dispersed, because having a free press, I think that's leaks are part of their responsibility. Anyway, third on the list is this came actually before this generation technically, but it does have to do with the generation. It was probably the primary reason that the PS4 had such a big lead in this generation. It's the Xbox One's DRM, Connect, online features, and then subsequent backtracking from all that. So if you remember, in 2013, PlayStation comes out and says, here's the PS4. It's great. Game console. We love games. We love gamers. We want the gamers to have the best experiences. Here's what the PS4 is. Here are all the games. Whatever. And then Xbox comes out and they're like, in their conference, they're saying television, television, television. And I do, just side note, I do think that specific Xbox conference gets a bad rep for things that PlayStation had a great conference. I don't think that Xbox conference was as bad as people say it was. In comparison with the PlayStation one, it was awful. They only showed like 3 games and it wasn't great. But one of the things that came out of it is that the Xbox One will not allow used game sales, or they have DRM where a game can only be like the license of a game will be assigned with a console, so you can't sell it or you can't move it to a different game, different console. The Kinect will be coming with the Xbox One and it has to be plugged in. And the Xbox One has to check in every 24 hours to work, which the 3 of those, granted, so the used game thing was a huge problem back in, a problem. It was a huge thing at the end of the PS3 and Xbox 360 generation. It's less of a thing now. Maybe it's just me and my circles, but buying so many games on digital, used game the idea of a used game just doesn't cross my mind. But the Kinect was just, it was just a big thing, like just a big camera. I had one for a while. I never used it. And I just thought it was such a big, waste. And then the online thing, the idea of having to check your console in online every 24 hours is still really weird. And I still don't really like it. However, the games we play have become basically always online, so it doesn't really matter. games as a service becoming so prevalent. Almost every game we play is somehow online at most times. And I think it was just so interesting to see how the two companies took two wildly, vastly different strategies at the start of this generation, and one of them just turned out to be flat out wrong, in terms of what the people wanted, to the point where the Xbox was like, all right, never mind. And they just go back and they say, you know what? No DRM, no always online. And then they remove the Kinect from the Xbox within a year, like a year or two. It's such an interesting way to see it. And I've been upfront about this. I think Xbox has made such a turnaround throughout the generation, but they had such a huge disadvantage at the start of it that it was almost physically impossible for them to come back. And obviously they didn't. It was such a long-lasting mistake that they made, that they had to go through so many changes, and they paid for it. Next on the list is a big topic of discussion this year, or not this year, throughout the past few years. Obviously, or not, I don't know if it's obviously, but really affecting how games are made. Actually, some of the articles came from Jason Schreier, and he's a really big proponent of working against this, and it is crunch and the environments that games are made in and the cultures that surround some of these studios. The big two, I'd say, at least as far as I remember offhand, are Rockstar and Naughty Dog, the two cultures that have really been heavily criticized for. Rockstar for, I feel like they're more over the top, kind of blatant disregard for their employees' health in their incentivizing crunching, where they were, not, I don't know, I don't remember the exact details. Probably should have looked this up, but they, Rockstar just had they had this like expose about their crunch culture leading up to Red Dead 2, that made me feel really guilty playing Red Dead 2, knowing that all these little details came from someone working 100-hour weeks, being absolutely overworked, and people hating their lives and sleeping at work and not being able to see their families, because if they left or if they didn't work for crunch, they were going to be fired or they weren't going to be given bonuses or something like that. And at Naughty Dog, it seems like it's a little more structural, where it's structural in both for sure, but at Naughty Dog, it seems like it's less blatant, straightforward, and it's more like, hey, at Naughty Dog, we only hire the best, and the best always want to crunch. And if you don't want to crunch, you're not the best, so we're not going to hire you. It's kind of one of those things, like it's a cycle, and it just burns people out so much that to the point where it was something like 80 or 90% of The Last of Us Part 2's development didn't work on Uncharted 4 because they had burned through so many people. And that was why The Last of Us Part 2 took so long. Also, I want to point out that The Last of Us Part 2 was revealed 3.5 years ago. That's a long-ass time to be revealed. That's a full game for some companies. Anyway, and then there was also this thing about the voice actors striking because of residual pay that they weren't being given. And I think it all kind of culminates in workers not being treated right by these companies who make so much money from the games, but the people making them and the people involved with them are just not really treated right. And it's hard to say where they're going because it's still something we're in the midst of. Crunch is just such a structural, integral part of game development, for better or for worse, mostly for worse. But crunch is just something that is basically built into games, because any game developer will tell you that no game is perfect. Obviously, story-wise, gameplay-wise, but in terms of there's always another bug to fix. There's always something they want to tweak, that you're going into crunch and you're saying, oh, I can work another hour and fix a few more bugs, and like play test them, or I can work 20 more hours today and fix a couple bugs, and then play test them, and like maybe they work, or maybe I have to go back and that just all fucked up and I lost 20 hours of work. It's something that really has to be dealt with. And it looks like Rockstar has made some changes from the top down that they're working for. I think Naughty Dog will probably start to do that after The Last of Us releases. If anything, just because it's been so much public outcry. The problem is we don't know where the lesser problems lie. We know that Rockstar and Naughty Dog are bad because so many people have come out and talked about it, but we don't know where there are companies that are like, I'm not working 100-hour weeks. I'm only working 70-hour weeks, which is still bad, but it's not, it's not quite as bad. So like, maybe I'm just not going to talk about it. Like it's things like that could end up being problems, that are just never talked about and just are normalized. That's where we start to see problems. And I'm hoping that over time we start to see less and less crunch, and game developers start to get treated better and not have to go through such terrible working conditions that are pretty much universal throughout. Obviously, there are some good exceptions, but for the most part, I feel like there's crunch everywhere. And hopefully, even if it extends game development times, if the average is like 3 years, it moves it to 4 years, I'm okay with that. There are a lot of games. I just hope the developers are okay. Fifth on the list is another thing from early in the generation. When the PS4 and Xbox One were first launched, and there was this controversy about the graphics on either machine. The PS4 was pretty widely reviewed as the more powerful console, just in terms of pure hardware. And because of that, it felt like so many games were on the PS4 as running at 1080p. And Xbox One these games would come out and they're like, we're running at 1080 on PS4, but on Xbox, we're only running at 900 or 720. And this was a big deal for a while. Not necessarily even like this was like a huge deal in terms of like this actually affected how games played, but a lot of people cared about this. And I don't even, like, I gotta say, just in hindsight, why the fuck was this such a big deal? Who cares? Like, I guess there's been this big jump towards 4K recently, and like if this kind of disparity happened this generation, and it was like, we're playing at 4K on Xbox, but we're only playing at like, I don't know, 2140 or 2160 on PS5, that's probably a bigger deal. But you're talking like you're going from 900 to 1080. I would play some games on both Xbox and PS4 and not notice a difference. And it was just numbers. And I think this was a symptom of the console wars that happened, or always have happened. But people really going at each other and being like, oh, Xbox One sucks because you only have fucking 180 less P than we have. We're at 1080 and we're actually the superior console. And it was really exhausting. It's less of a problem now because of the Xbox One X and the PS4 Pro, which have made 4K games and 1080 games, obviously a lot more prevalent. No one really talks about it anymore. But I never really hear anything about games on Xbox One not running at 1080. And I assume it's just people becoming more confident with the consoles, and being able to develop with higher graphics and run it at a higher optimization. I don't necessarily understand how all that works, so I might be completely wrong there. Maybe some of them still do run at 900, but who knows? If anything, it might have spurred Xbox to make the Xbox One be so powerful because they didn't want to go through that again. But I honestly don't know. That was just one controversy that I was thinking of that's just such a fucking relic of 2014, where people were just so mad at the Xbox One, probably as a residual of the Xbox One not treating their gamers right in still the wake of that DRM and always online thing, or online once every 24 hours thing. I think people had such a bad taste in their mouths with Xbox that anything against them became such a mountain. And I think it's good that we've moved past it. I don't like when either console has, either manufacturer has a really big problem with them. Like when PS3 launched and it was like, it's $600. Or when Xbox One launched and it's like, we suck. Hopefully we move into the next generation and neither of those happen and it's really just an even playing field. Lastly is probably, I'd say, the biggest controversy of this generation. It's become part of so many games, from games as a service, free-to-play games, even just random open world games, and that's microtransactions, and to both a lesser and a greater extent, loot boxes. Microtransactions were, in the past, think about Guitar Hero, when a microtransaction was, I'm going to pay you $1 for an extra song or two, and everyone was like, it's, cool. But DLC was always just, I want a map pack for Call of Duty, or I want an avatar from Uncharted for my profile. And then it turned into, I just want to be able to buy, in Assassin's Creed, I just want more money, or I want a different outfit, or things like that. And it's become so ubiquitous that it's so tiring. I generally have the self-control to not buy anything. Also because I just don't really care usually enough to buy something from a microtransaction. But especially when you start to look at loot boxes, which are their own microtransactions, that's when it becomes a real problem, where Call of Duty and Overwatch and a lot of other games offer these opportunities to buy a randomized box for you can spend $5 and you get 3 boxes, and in those boxes you get a chance, there's a 60% chance of a blue item or whatever, but you don't know what it's going to be, and you don't know if you're going to get that, and it's effectively gambling, and it's been assigned gambling by I don't know if it's been assigned gambling by anywhere in the US, but it has been overseas, and it's a real problem. It's a gambling thing. It is just straight up gambling in a lot of ways that, Battlefront 2 had this big problem, and EA came under a lot of fire for it. EA has had a troubled generation when it comes to microtransactions. Maybe not financially, but in terms of their public image, they have taken a lot of heat. And I think, when it comes to certain games, Fortnite comes to mind. microtransactions are fine. Like, I'm not bashing Fortnite for being a free-to-play game that works great on its own. I have never spent a cent in Fortnite. I've played dozens of hours of it with my friends, on my own, whatever. I've played dozens of hours of it. I've never spent a cent in it. It gives you the opportunity to get your own V-Bucks, that you can buy the battle pass with the V-Bucks that you get while just playing the game. Or you can go in and you can buy the battle pass, or you can buy a certain amount of V-Bucks, and that's perfectly fine. That's something you like. That, I think, is a very balanced, purely cosmetic, like very unassuming way to do microtransactions, and I'm supportive of it. Like, let games make money for the people. If people want to pay for it, great. If they don't, fine. But when it gets to the point of people, or of games taking advantage of their players in terms of both loot boxes and, here's this thing that we're basically taking the mobile route. We're going to make it a lot harder right now. We're going to make this game significantly more difficult at a specific point because we want you to buy a microtransaction where it will become significantly easier. And that starts to really, really get on my nerves, because the games are effectively deceiving you into buying something that if maybe they're not forcing you to, but if they're heavily, heavily encouraging it, they're effectively selling you something incomplete. If you need to buy something to continue in a game, or they so heavily encourage it, then it's an incomplete game. And I just don't support that. Now, I'm fine with if a game wants to sell cosmetics, like I said with Fortnite. If you want to sell outfits for, like, I don't know how much, just however much, to the customers, and in turn, these people on, like, Battlefront or Call of Duty or whatever can dress as their favorite comic book star, or superhero, or celebrity. Great. I love that. Doesn't affect gameplay. But not only, like I mentioned, if there's something that helps you get through something, but if there's something that gives you an advantage, that's also a problem, because that's pay to win. And if you have a pay to win situation, that's incentivizing spending money on these games, and that's also a really big problem. I guess this is just me being more frustrated with it than really being able to offer any kind of solution to it other than just don't do it. I think we have started to see a little bit of a decline to it because of all the public outcry, which is great. I love, like, people speak their mind, and companies hear it, and EA releases Jedi Fallen Order without any microtransactions, and that's great. But I really hope that it doesn't become something more, or come back in a way that if gamers start to let down their guard and say, like, oh, we're fine, they're stopping it, or they're only implementing it in, like, cosmetics or whatever way that's, like, generally okay, then, like, they might come back and say, oh no, like, here are loot boxes again. But we don't really know. And it's a little concerning moving into the next generation, because we know that these free-to-play games, these games as a service, are probably not going anywhere. And I just really hope, and I mean, like I said, on the surface, just flat out, those games are not a problem. I don't have any trouble with games as a service. I think it's a really cool way to do it. It's a really cool way to to set up a game where it's a living world and things can change over and over again, and they could just go in and do these hot fixes, or like if there's a problem, or just say like world events, or things that just change. That's a really cool way to make a game. But if you start taking advantage of your players, that's when it's not. And that's when it really becomes a problem, especially because there are people with things like loot boxes where that's an addiction, and that's something that can, and in my opinion probably should be illegal to sell something like that to kids. Kids playing FIFA Ultimate Team and buying packs that if they walked into a casino, they wouldn't be allowed to gamble, but they're allowed to spend their money or their parents' money on these packs that are effectively doing the same thing. And it's really concerning. And I all I can say is that it looks like it has recently been kind of dying down, just a little bit at least. But I don't think that I don't buy for a second that they're not at least thinking about it as companies, ways to implement it. And I think that consumers of video games need to hold keep their foot on the gas when it comes to the backlash. So anyway, after that, long and drawn out talk about microtransactions and controversy in general, that was a pretty long segment. That's going to end the NoochieCast episode 12. This has been a hell of an episode. I guess by the time I see you next, the PS5 will have been revealed, and hopefully we'll see the console. Maybe we'll see the price. Maybe we'll see the date. Probably not. But hopefully we'll have some new games to talk about. In the meantime, thank you for listening. My name is Matt Bianucci. This has been the NoochieCast, and I'll see you next time.